Hi, my name's Kim. I'm a licensed and nationally certified East Asian medical provider and a Taoist practitioner. On this channel, I talk about health, holistic ways you can improve or maintain your health, and newsworthy events that could have a huge impact on your health. And a lot of that I talk about in hashtag Half Truths. And today, guess what? We have another episode of hashtag Half Truths as we talk about that Kroger-Albertsons merger and the potential it has to completely reshape the grocery industry and the potential it has to do significant harm to you and me as a consumer or as employees. I have a special treat for you today as we have Claire Donovan joining us and bringing her expertise in finance, business, and overall research as we examine this significant power play by Kroger to consolidate more of the grocery retail industry.
Thank you, Kim, for having me. I always find it a pleasure to be here with you. Interesting choice of words, Kim. Power play.
Claire, good to see you. And how so?
Well, let me tell you what a power buyer is. National Groceries Association has been talking about these power buyers, and that sounds kind of dangerous because it is. And if you don't know what a power buyer is, well, then let me show you. Remember when private labels used to just occupy a really small percentage of the grocery store shelves? Well, I just went into Kroger the other week and it's a little bit different today. Today in Kroger, the private labels are occupying or consuming 50% or more of the grocery shelf space. And when something has a chance of being out of stock, it doesn't appear to be the private label stuff.
Claire, what does that mean?
Well, a power buyer controls so much of the market that they can actually dictate what goods are sold and at what price. And after this merger of Kroger and Albertsons, in most of the markets that Kroger will be serving, they're going to own 70% of the market. Now, that's a lot. And when has lack of competition been good for us?
Okay, I see what you're saying. I had noticed that before the pandemic when I would look for some of the different flours that you need to do your baking, such as bread flour or pastry flour for cakes. And I would go to the major grocery store chains and you just couldn't find it. I ended up having to order that from specialty suppliers like King Arthur, or the one that I really like out of Minnesota, the Heritage Wheat one, Sunrise Flour Mill.
When I was shopping, it was really hard to find products that were not private label. Kroger was only stocking a couple different competitors, and without competition, food delivered from private labels really has no reason to provide quality at a reasonable price. I mean, I don't know. Many of the private label brands could be of a lower quality. I don't really enjoy them as much as the brand names, but I don't know. And you see, now that's been the problem lately. All this consolidation and merging of our food supply chain has created these power buyers in every part of the supply chain. And then couple that with these corporate executives. They're doing all this cost cutting, and all that cost cutting isn't about helping the company. All that cost cutting seems to be paid out to corporate executives in bonuses or raises.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, we had done an episode, right? Just a few months ago on the CFO of PepsiCo. What was his name? Hugh Johnson. He basically had said that all the price increases from the suppliers, that was going to be passed on to the consumer. But he also said that they had done significant cost cutting, which they didn't use that cost cutting to offset the prices or to try and make their product better, it appears that they took all that cost-cutting savings and they passed it or funneled it through to the executive pay, which took a 15% increase last year, whereas the employees were given a 2% increase.
Oh, yes. Hugh Johnson. Who could forget? Yes, according to Mr. Johnson, you and me, a luxury item is a can of soda.
They're employed, wages are going up, they have money in their pockets, and we're kind of the affordable treat or the affordable luxury that you tend to spend money on anyway. And we're kind of the affordable treat or the affordable luxury that we're kind of the affordable treat or the affordable luxury.
You know, he just took a job at Walt Disney World, and he took that at the beginning of November of 2023.
You know, I can't imagine what his strong customer focus and laser focus on finding a nickel is doing for Disney World today.
Well, since you asked, that same day that Mr. Johnson took over the reins of Disney World's financials, that same day, police were at the park entrance detaining and threatening to arrest third-party tour guides, while Disney security served them with trespass notices and bans from the park. Okay, now I get it. You're going to say, well, that's in there, whatever. They're like CC&Rs. But let's be real. No pre-notification, no warning. Just yank them from the entrance lines while they are there with the customers and make them appear to be common criminals. And some of these tour operators have been operating for years and seem to fill a niche for the park.
Okay, since you brought it up, let me just look here. Just take a brief minute to look. And you know what? The only tour guide that I can find is this VIP tour guide. And wow, $450 to $900 an hour. Well, there's a nickel.
Okay, well, let me show you on this private tour guide. Here's an individual who paid $700 for 6 hours. So big difference in pricing.
It does seem like there's this niche market which is not getting addressed with these VIP tours.
Completely. There does seem to be this niche market that really needs help.
And I think if we look at these small independent tour guides, what this might suggest is that larger is not always better, right? And that's kind of the theme that we're dealing with right now, that maybe larger is not going to be better for the consumer or the employee.
Yeah, when we're talking bigger, totally not better. And I think that's really a true statement today. The big concern for the consumer is we already have quality and affordability issues in our food supply chain that have been caused by all this consolidation of the food supply chain into usually 4 big players in each market. So let's look at the egg market. There's 4 players. The pork market, about 4 players. The seed market, 4 players, and so on, and so on, and so on. When that happens, it's weird, but prices actually rise and competition falls.
Claire, you know, one of the places where I have any real life experience in this would be like the car industry, the auto industry, where, you know, back in the 70s and 80s, we shopped the jobs out to the lowest bidder, which seemed like a good idea at first because the price of the cars went down, right? But as competition became less and less, look what happened. Today, the cost of cars have skyrocketed. And not only has it skyrocketed, but the jobs, the union jobs now, they barely pay above minimum wage.
True. And that's what will happen here right now. Private labels are consuming maybe 50% of the shelf space in the retail grocery stores. And imagine what will happen when they have a corner on the grocery trade and can charge whatever they want and dictate whatever they want to put on the shelves. They'll be able to cut out all competition.
And there is no reason for the consumer to expect anything else, because we've already experienced 20 or 30 years of this consolidation happening in the food supply chain. It just wasn't easily seen because it was happening in the supply chain. But now it's going to be happening in the retail chain where you and I go to shop. And that's going to be a lot more obvious to us, the consumers.
Yes, I think that is really scary when you consider what a challenge it is to find and buy healthy food right now. Think about what will happen to our already compromised supply chain when the store can dictate what you can get to choose from the private labels. Only private labels.
When you think about that, think of all the industries behind the grocery stores that they're going to be impacted also. Today, we have corporations like Nabisco and Kraft that still pay a decent salary. But what happens when a grocery store can corner the market and limit competition? Is this going to be like the auto industry, where the jobs used to be good paying jobs where you could support your family off of them? Now these jobs, they just barely crest minimum wage and the benefits are just not there. And the question becomes, is that where we're going to be going with this merger? I hate to say it, but there are some historical indicators that this is what is going to happen with this merger. We've talked about the consumer, and more than likely in 3 to 5 years, because it always takes these mega mergers a couple years to get everything in place before they can really deliver what they wanted to deliver. It's going to take them about 3 or 5 years. And at that time, that's when we're going to start seeing higher prices that there's no way to get out of. And we've talked about the supply chain. And as these power buyers are able to gain more and more control of the supply chain, they're going to find ways to produce cheaper and less healthy foods, if that's at all possible. That's the thing, right? Right now we have this corporate giant saying they're not going to lay off workers and they're going to honor the union contracts. But is that really true? Claire, we've talked about the consumer, and the reality is, as these power buyers gain more and more of the retail space, the consumer is probably going to see in about 3 to 5 years that they are going to have fewer options and they're going to have to pay higher prices. And why it takes about 3 to 5 years is it usually takes these mega mergers about that much time to figure out all the things they have to have in place to gain that kind of control. And we've talked about the supply chain as well, that as these power buyers are allowed to gain more and more control over the supply chain, they're going to find ways to make things cheaper and less healthy, if that's at all possible. Kind of wonder about that today, don't you? And by doing that, they're going to start muscling out all the current suppliers and potentially push these suppliers and their employees into poverty, something similar to the chicken egg industry. But you know what we haven't talked about? We haven't talked about the employee. And Claire, what have you seen? What is going to happen to the employee with this mega merger?
I think we have to look at the special dividend that was paid out to Albertsons shareholders at the beginning of January 2023. And you're probably wondering, what is a special dividend? Well, let me tell you. Now, dividends, they're usually paid from shareholder profits, right? So the company made a profit this year. Even special dividends paid from profit. So if the company makes more money than what they owe at the end of the year. They have this profit and they can pay some of that out to the shareholders, and some of that they put in savings. So they have cash to cover, strange expenses. Like if it was you and I, we put money away in our bank account to cover when that stupid car is going to break, right? But let's see here. That's not what Albertsons did, okay? As a special side deal, Kroger agreed to allow Albertsons to pay themselves a special dividend. But the crazy part was the size of the dividend and how they funded it. So this dividend was $6.85 in one quarter. Now, their dividend is usually 12 cents a quarter. So there's this big difference between what they usually pay in a quarter and what this special dividend was. And let me show you, this dividend didn't come from profits. So you can see this in 2023 and pretty much all over the place. Their dividend is 12 cents a quarter. That's the usual dividend amount. And so for the year, 4 quarters, about 48 cents. So less than 50 cents, less than 2 quarters. So 2 quarters, you and I can't even buy a pack of gum, but that's what it is, okay? And so this special dividend, it's a one-time payout of $6.85. Wow. So we can see that if we look, I'm going to show you something. Let me show you their profit and loss statement. So the profit and loss statement, it's going to show what their revenues are, and then it's going to show what their profits are. So their profits after they pay that 12 cents dividend is this. $1.2 billion. You know what that $6.85 is worth? $4 billion. $4 billion. Well, even if they consumed all the profit that they made for the year, that's only $1.2 billion. And they shouldn't be doing that anyways, right? Because they're supposed to be putting some away for that rainy day. And instead of doing that, they're taking all the profit, but they're not just taking that profit. They're actually being allowed to clean out all the bank accounts. So they clean out all the bank accounts to do this huge payout. But guess what? That's not enough money yet. So they're still about $2 billion short. So what does Kroger and Albertson agree to allow Albertsons to do? And okay, let me tell you. Oh my gosh, let me tell you this. Okay. They agree to allow Albertson to take out a loan for the additional $2 billion. So Kroger says to Albertson's board of directors, you can clear out all the cash in the bank accounts. Just clear it all out and give it to yourself. And then you don't have enough money to make this $6.85. So I'm going to approve that you take out a loan, and you take out a loan for that other $2 billion, and you just pay that to yourself too. Who gets to do that?
Claire, can you help me understand what you're saying?
Well, let's make this personal, okay? You've heard about those horrible divorces where one person cleans out all the bank accounts and then goes out and takes out as many credit cards as they possibly can, and they max out all those credit cards. Well, that's what the Albertsons board of directors and shareholders proposed to Kroger, and Kroger agreed.
Okay, yes, I've heard of that. I actually know of a couple of divorces where that happened. Why would Kroger agree to something like this? I mean, when this happens in a divorce, it causes long-term financial harm, and some of these individuals end up having to declare bankruptcy. So doesn't that do the same thing here?
Yes, dear, I'm afraid it does. It puts Albertson at risk of bankruptcy, and that's the point, because both Kroger and Albertsons know this merger has too many antitrust issues, so too many competition issues. And in fact, a consumer group filed a lawsuit in Northern California stating that this Kroger-Albertson merger, this special payout, was these two companies seeking to financially cripple Albertsons. And if Albertsons is financially crippled, it forces the FTC to approve the merger. Sneaky.
Wow, Claire, that is super depressing. So what happened with the lawsuit? Because you think that you're going to go to your legal system for justice.
At some point in time, you and I, we're going to be able to go to our legal systems for justice, but not this time. This case, it was dismissed. And this is a theme that we're seeing with corporate executives and private equity firms like Cerberus. Okay, so you're going, who's Cerberus? We're talking about Kroger and Albertsons. Well, let me tell you who Cerberus is. Cerberus bought Albertsons in 2006, and they are the majority shareholder of Albertsons. They're this private equity firm. You might have heard of it. You might have heard the term hedge funds, and you know how many people are so upset with hedge funds today because what hedge funds do is they find unique ways to pillage the coffers of corporate America and take all the money for themselves. So Cerberus is one of those. It's a private equity firm. It's a hedge fund. And they came up with this really unique solution to Kroger to hopefully ensure that the FTC is forced to approve the merger and to allow Cerberus to clean out a huge amount of money from Albertsons. Now, I think, just so you know, Cerberus bought Albertsons for $379 million or $375 million. So a fraction of this $4 billion that they're asking to be paid, right? So anyways, so we're talking about the corporate executives. And I think when we look at this, you know, we're starting to see consistently that corporate executives have different rules than you and I. And why I say that is because Albertsons pension fund covers 300,000 employees, and right now it's underfunded. What seems bizarre, right, is because we've just come out of one of the most aggressive run-ups of the stock market in our lives, in history. And Cerberus is supposed to be this private equity firm that owns Albertsons. It's supposed to be really good at investments, you know, so I would have thought it'd be able to help out with the investments of this pension fund. And yet that pension fund's underfunded, and it's seriously underfunded by about $4 billion, the amount that Cerberus wants to raid from the corporation.
Oh, I see. Wow.
Here you have 300,000 employees who have agreed to work for Albertson for a certain pay and benefits. They've earned pension benefits that are not completely funded. And instead of paying, so Cerberus, instead of paying on their current outstanding debt, Kroger and Albertsons being Cerberus, agree to ransack the bank accounts of Albertsons and run up the debt.
That sounds really shady, Claire. I've heard that Albertsons is owned by the majority shareholder is this private equity firm called Cerberus, and that it was Cerberus who proposed the deal as part of their negotiations. So does Albertsons have a history of questionable deals?
Oh, interesting you should bring that up. So in 2014, as part of the deal to acquire Safeway, Albertsons sold stores to Hagen's, which is the small grocery chain in the Northwest.
Goodness. I remember
in the Pacific
Hagen's.
Northwest.
It was this small grocery store chain here in the Pacific Northwest. They had really clean stores. Their focus was on quality and cleanliness. I was really comfortable shopping at Hagen's, knowing I was getting the best that their buyers could find.
True, true. It was a great grocery store chain. And Albertson pitched the sale to Hagen's that it would poise them to become this really viable competitor that would be capable of competing against Safeway and Albertsons in the future. Well, less than a year later, Hagen ends up filing for bankruptcy, and they had to close those 27 stores that they acquired. And when they sued Albertsons, they stated that Albertsons, on those 27 stores that they sold them, that they overstocked the stores with all these perishable fruits and meats. They provided inaccurate pricing, which was another piece that contributed to the higher prices. Sneaky, huh? And they failed to perform the necessary maintenance on the stores and their equipments. Basically, they sold them trash. I think the thing is, if you and I owe something, we have to pay that first. And here's the thing we've been seeing is corporate execs, they live by different rules. So Cerberus, this private equity firm, they bought Albertsons in 2006. So they've had this company for a long time. And they could have addressed this underfunded pension, and it's definitely a part of the Cerberus management. So the union and the pension fund stated that Albertsons should first make sure the pension is fully funded before raiding the bank accounts. Now, if you and I were doing this, this would not fly. Someone would garnish our wages or put a lien on our assets to pay what we owe, but not here, different rules. And after the merger, when does a corporation actually do what they say they were going to do and not lay off workers or close stores? In some of these cities where Kroger and Albertsons are going to combine, they have multiple stores right next to each other. It definitely isn't in their history. So Albertsons cleared out the bank accounts and ran up all the credit cards before the merger. I'm sure some of us have had experience with that kind of situation. Exactly. And who's left holding the bag? The employees and the customers, or the consumers, of course. The FTC has final say on this, right? Because they're supposed to regulate any of these antitrust, anti-competition issues. So what are they saying, Claire? Interesting that you bring that up. Now, just as an aside, I want to tell you a different story for just a second. You know, earlier in 2023, JetBlue wanted to merge with Spirit Airlines. Okay. Well, the FTC denied it because it would reduce competition for the end consumer. And you and I have to think about that because you're probably like me. You're wondering where these two, JetBlue and Spirit, together, they make 8% of the market. What they're saying, it makes no sense. There's 4 big players in the market that control 80% of the market. It's something like United, American Airlines, Delta. So they control 80% of the market, and this little JetBlue and Spirit controls 8% of the market, and they're going to reduce competition? How does that work? And then we have the FTC and this Kroger-Albertson merger, which clearly reduces competition for the consumer, creates this power buyer that's going to reduce competition in the supply chain, and it's going to have a huge impact on good paying jobs, and it's harming the employees who agreed to give up their labor for a fair wage and a pension. And this one, they're like, yeah, okay, boom, have at it. Have at it, guys. Good on you. Creative thought process there.
This deal has met with a lot of resistance over the past year. There's been 2 different lawsuits filed in 2 different states concerning this raiding of the corporate bank accounts for that special dividends, and both those cases were dismissed. And there's been a lot of pushback from industry groups concerned over the lack of competition that this merger is going to create, including groups like national grocers associations, unions, consumer groups, states, industry. It's crazy how many people are talking about what a bad deal this is for competition. And recently, a number of senators spoke to the FTC asking them to reevaluate this merger.
Yes, with all the pushback, the clear arguments, and a history that supports all their arguments, it's incredible that the FTC is still considering approving it. You have to wonder about that.
You definitely have to wonder about that, Claire. Right now, the rules are if you own shares, if you are a shareholder, then you get to control the corporate direction. That's who we are today.
Yes, that's our current position.
Yet I'm wondering if that is still the truth. Is that the truth anymore?
Interesting. Historically, it used to be that some individual risked all their resources to start a company, but that doesn't happen anymore. Private equity plays this huge role in using the system to game the system against others who have a stake in the corporation. You know, others like the employees. And we found out during the pandemic that employees in the grocery store, they were actually way more important than the shareholders, right? So why don't they have a seat on the board? And what about the environment? We're finding out daily that corporations' interaction with the environment is dictating if we're going to be able to live in our house and drink our water. Why doesn't someone representing the environment have a board seat?
Oh, are you talking about things like the PFAS case that was settled for $300 billion? You know, I grew up in Minnesota where 3M is stationed, and now I know so many individuals who have homes with groundwater that's contaminated with PFAS.
Well, that's one of the examples. There's so many of them out there, but didn't the Netherlands just come out with a finding that they tested the ocean foam around them and they found that contains PFAS? And they're warning individuals to keep their dogs out of the sea foam and that they themselves should stay out of that sea foam.
That case just highlights the extensive long-term harm that corporations can do to the areas where we live. And it also highlights the harm that it can do to the public and the end consumer, because PFAS is so deadly that this is about killing your children now.
It does. Oxycontin, another example of long-term harm to the public and the consumer. So why don't both of these groups, the public and the consumer, have a seat on the board? The thing is, it's not just money that's invested into a corporation anymore. People's time or labor, health, welfare are also invested. And you might say, well, people trade their labor for wages and benefits, and exactly the point. Shareholders trade their dollars for a percentage of physical assets. It's the same as buying a house. And all these individuals are trading for a piece of this corporate asset. So maybe it's time that they all have an ownership say.
Interesting, Claire. You always have a different take on things. And you're right. We're no longer in the Industrial Revolution. We are way past that. So maybe we need to reevaluate how we, the rules that we play by.
True, maybe. All I know is this merger doesn't make things better for the consumer, and it definitely hasn't been fair to the employees. And that special dividend, it should be reversed. And this merger, it's going to give a huge piece of control of our food supply chain to one corporation who's already showing us what it is going to do with that authority.
Claire, thank you for coming out and talking to us. Our food supply chain has already been compromised over the last 20, 40 years as these large corporations have gobbled up and consolidated everything into just a few corporations, into basically 4 in every major category. And today I'm finding I am making so many things that I used to buy. I'm making so many things at home from scratch just because this quality has been getting so bad. I am just learning how to make apple cider vinegar. And, just the other day, I bought mayonnaise from one of the major brand names and they changed the formulation. It's really pretty gross. I opened it up and squeezed out mayonnaise and all this water, all this discolored liquid came out for a long time. And then mayonnaise came out that didn't taste like mayonnaise, of course. And I thought it was just maybe in the plastic squeeze bottles, but no, we bought a jar. Same thing. It's just weird now.
Yes, I don't know where we're going from here yet. If we want a different result, we're probably going to have to start doing a different thing. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Okay, until next time, I will catch you on the other side.